Howdy, folks. Happy Tuesday. Well, happy for everybody except Maple Leaf fans right now. We'll discuss that in a few minutes. But we'll start off with a quick pre-show here. Russ, I sent you something this morning regarding the Baseball Hall of Fame. There was a time period in between the release of the Hall of Famers and I think it was like a week or 2 weeks. They said they were going to reveal the votes of everybody who was wishing to have them revealed, and 80% of the Baseball Hall of Fame writers have revealed their votes. Of course, the one who did not vote for Derek Jeter is not one of the people who released their ballot.
Yeah, again, the same reason that we argued for it for the Professional Hockey Writers Association, and I was at the meeting where it was first brought up, and Kevin brought it up, and it was a little static, but by the end of the time, it was like, you know what, it's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do. Like, if you feel like, if you have the privilege to vote and you feel like your voting is valid, you should put your name on it and have to back it up if you do. And I wouldn't even care if I was the person that said something that people found incendiary, I would back it up. But the problem is when you've got 20% and that guy's included in the 20%, there's not going to be a way of figuring it out.
Yeah. You know, it took a while though, if you remember, Russ, like,
yeah, so the next year, right? I think it was the next year.
No. It took several years. Like, it was brought up. It was brought up for several years. And initially, more people wanted to keep it secret than wanted it open.
Yeah, that's right. You're right.
And then it just took time. And over time, you know, it became, you know, crucial to transparency. The only thing I would say, and I say it from a humorous perspective, like, you can understand why the guy doesn't want to reveal it, because people don't really want him to defend his position, because there is no defense of that position. What they want to do is be mad at him, like, because that's what this is all about. Like, we want to know who he is so we can jump on his head verbally and embarrass him, humiliate him, do all what we can. There's no greater joy or glee then this is what we've really uncovered in the use of social media, that people can get than to heap on somebody. Like, it's people take great joy. They just
I don't know why, but
I don't know people like that, Kev. I have no idea.
I know. Like, it's so, like, that's the one thing that I shouldn't have been surprised, because I guess it's human nature. But, you know, as we got more and more involved with social media, I just noticed that, you know, nobody, you know, just the joy that it gives them to be able to, like, if they go to get their tires rotated and the service is not good,
right?
Like, they love just getting on that guy, you know, just like, you know, you could just see it the way they write it. Like, they're not animated about, you know, regular posts, but boy, when they're mad about something.
No, there's just something about venting negativity. Just, it flows through you. It's like, and it does make for good content sometimes.
Yeah.
Mike does it hourly.
Just one thing here before we get started. And, you know, I love politics. I love the political game. I you know, like yesterday, I have the split screen of the Leafs Panthers game and the Iowa caucuses, and at least with one of them there was a resolution. I mean, I can't believe that we've had elections that have gone to 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. I've never seen an instance where we've gotten no results of anything for now almost close to 18 hours.
Oh no, we have Florida.
Well, no, but there was a result, but it was disputed through.
No, they stopped counting.
No, but Russ, they had a total, then they recounted. I'm saying that there's nothing. Yeah. And you had people in these gymnasiums in Des Moines and all these other little places throughout Iowa who were saying, who were going to put their votes, and because an app crashed, nothing got reported. I have never seen people on TV scramble so badly than they were last night. I mean, they were running out of things to say at 10 o'clock because there were no results.
Yeah, that's crazy. I didn't watch it, but I knew about it. The only thing I could say is technology is a great thing, but if you have technology, you should test it completely. And it seems like it wasn't tested completely.
Apparently they tested it a couple of weeks ago and the app crashed then.
Yeah, see, that's
abandoned it. They also ran a walkthrough where they didn't actually use the app. They went all the way through the process through the process without using the app. This really is disgraceful.
It is.
There's no explanation for it. I found myself agreeing with President Trump for the first time ever. He called it disgraceful, and I completely agree. They should have debugged this long before they got to this point. And what makes it worse is that they're the first.
Right.
This is the kickoff.
And they may be the last. I'm
sure it will be now, because every year every time we do this, there's some complaint about it. It's not the way that we should vote.
It happened 8 years ago in a smaller sense, because the Republicans had a primary in 2012 where they named Mitt Romney the winner, and then 4 days later they said, "Oh, Rick Santorum won," and It's like, okay, that took all the momentum away from Santorum if he had actually won it on the night of, if it was a primary. So there's a lot
but should the momentum of winning in Iowa really have been as great as it was anyway? That's a fair argument.
Sure.
People have said that for a long time, because usually 3 or 4 people get a boost by what happens in Iowa, and 3 or 4 drop out.
Yeah.
And now we haven't had that. If Buttigieg ended up not, if he did indeed win, he would have gotten a big boost out of this that he won't probably get now, because it'll be new.
Well, yeah, supposedly from what is leaked out, he's going to finish second to Sanders. But, the funny thing is, on the Democratic side, it always is a bellwether of who's going to win. Hillary won by, 4 years ago. Obama won in 2008. On the Republican side, it never is a bellwether. So,
but it wasn't a bellwether prior to then.
Yes, it was.
Only been
I will say this, though. I think the bell cows are probably laughing at the humans right now.
I was really interested in it, obviously, and I had tuned in, and I wanted to see what's happened. The Democratic primary is so crowded. Anybody who says they have any idea who's going to be the candidate is simply lying. You make it a guess, but it really is a guess.
Well, all I can say is I fell asleep waiting for the returns, and woke up to the voice of Amy Klobuchar, and nobody should have to wake up to Amy Klobuchar ever.
Oh, I like Amy Klobuchar.
I like her too, Mike.
I'm just taking a joke.
I don't even know how you could say anything negative about her.
No, I just
it's Mike.
It's Mike. Yes.
Yeah.
Hello, Hockey World. Today is Tuesday, February 4th, 2020.
I'm Russ Cohen, and I'm 56-0 in my fight versus cavities.
I'm Kevin Allen, still unemployed. So.
And I'm Michael Agello, and this is the HockeyBuzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. X seems to be joining us right now via the non-camera phone here from suburban Pennsylvania. Yes. Go ahead. We just started, so kick us off with whatever you can kick us off.
Yeah, sorry guys. Thanks guys for covering today for the show. Having some family stuff going on, but I did want to touch base on something, because I talked to one person late last night and another person this morning, and this was really kind of interesting, and that was the concept that he has heard that Phoenix, we'll call them Arizona, Arizona has decided to actually make some preliminary contacts around about possibly moving Taylor Hall again. And it's an interesting thought. Obviously Taylor Hall, this is a team that's in the middle of the playoffs. You guys can hear me okay, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I was expecting more of a shock,
Well,
we're a little stunned. We're listening.
Well, it's okay. So anyway, I'm just kidding. So anyway, obviously, this is a team that's, out of the playoffs right now. They're right on the edge of it. They're anybody in that teams in that division still can make the playoffs. They've faced some injuries. The thing about Taylor Hall that I had heard from New Jersey was that, he was pretty dead set on a destination he wants to go to, or he thinks he wants to go to. Sort of like, Tavares had Toronto. Taylor Hall's got a city. Some people believe that could be Calgary. And if Arizona has checked in on that, on the possibility of continuing with him after this season, and he's made it maybe known that he really does want to try out free agency, then and you're not a guarantee to make the playoffs, and he's not making the impact that you necessarily wanted him to make, I guess why not try to see what you could do, right?
Well, Kevin, I mean, we've got a little under 3 weeks before the deadline. Right now, Arizona is in the second wild card spot. My impression was they were going into this trade when they made it that he was going to be a rental, and best case scenario, if he liked it there, they could maybe get him re-signed. But I thought the mentality of Chaika was, we're going for the playoffs. This guy is a quality forward, and even if he's just a rental, this is the move we want to make.
Yeah, I completely agree, Mike. When this trade happened, this was speculated. We heard about this. I thought it was, a couple days ago. It sort of leaked out again that it might happen. But I think all of it is dependent on what happens over the next 10 days. It's imperative that Arizona qualify for the playoffs, and they looked like they were well on their way, and then they've been beset by injuries. The Kemper injury, I think, really robbed them of their, probably the best chance they've had to make the playoffs in a while. And they hung in there for a while, and all of a sudden they've won like 2 games in their last 10, or 2 in regulation.
Yeah.
2 in regulation.
Yeah.
And it's put them behind the 8 ball. But this fits in to the way that John Chaika manages. Taylor Hall's an asset, and you put it very well, Mike. I think when he got him, that's how he viewed him. We're going to use him to try to get in the playoffs, but if all of a sudden we fold our tent, I could still move him and get, the return that I gave up. He might even actually do better.
Yeah.
Possibly could do better. You know what, Kev? We always used to see this in other sports, and I think we are starting to see this more in hockey, where this kind of information gets leaked out to spark the players, because we'll talk about it, we'll write about it, the players will see it, and they'll get pissed off. And I think that's what the hope is here.
Either spark the player or get the general manager's ears burning, so they contact Chaika and maybe some actual crosstalk happens.
Not just the player, the whole team, because if I'm on that team, I don't want them to trade Taylor Hall, because that kills my playoff chances. I've got to play better now, so they don't do it.
Now, I don't rule out the possibility of this happening. It makes sense if they if 2 weeks from now they're 6 or 7 points out of the wild spot, then it makes total sense. And they're not the only team that could do this. I can tell you right now, if Toronto falls 6 or 7 points out of the playoff race, which I don't expect to happen, get prepared for Tyson Barrie rumors, because they'll move them to get their first round pick back, or at least some draft picks back, if they don't think they're going to make the playoffs.
Yeah, and I think Arizona, like Kevin said really well, Jake has been really good at this kind of thing. He definitely doesn't. He's not afraid of trading. He's not afraid of making trades. He's not afraid of doing bold trades. And the interesting name here and you're right, Kevin, that he could maybe get more than he wanted than he gave up for him, is because the interesting name here is the Islanders, which the Devils really weren't keen on doing that, moving Taylor Hall to the Islanders. But I did hear from several people that the Islanders had lots of interest in Taylor Hall. Now Taylor Hall comes via Arizona. Maybe Lou's willing to give something for that. Maybe Lou sees it as a possibility, even keeping him there. I don't know what Taylor Hall's long-range plans are, but there's definitely rumors out there, like I said before, that he has a set place in mind. But that could be anything. So I do think that it does have a lot to do with what happens in the next 3 weeks, and it'll be one of those trade deadline day decisions. But I do believe that they have talked to him. This is the real part I find interesting, is that they've talked to him and he's not going to come back there. And we all kind of knew that, but I think that they probably really know that now. That's what I've sort of gotten the sense of. Sometimes teams do believe, we get him in here, we can show him what we're all about.
I mean, we said that when the trade was made, based on who his agent is, and people got to remember, his agent is the same agent as Mitch Marner, the same agent as Andreas Etienne, the same agent as Josh Anderson, who held out players.
Yeah.
So
I don't think it's an agent thing in this case, though. I think Hall's driving the ship completely. I think this is Hall. This is Hall. Hall's going to do what he's going to want to do. Remember, this is a guy who did feel, he does feel like he was burned once, and that trade from Edmonton to New Jersey. Yeah. I think if anything makes you want to control your destiny for the future, the way that happened for Hall, that really made him want to control his destiny for the future. Well, and I'm not surprised at all if he does that.
I'm just saying that the agent, if the agent knows what the player wants, he's going to go to bat for the player he represents. And if he's going to, I remember when the trade was made, Kev, Hall's agent said, we'll talk about it before the end or before July after the year. It was the typical non-answer answer that an agent gives when they don't want to answer the question. So, I thought all along he was going to July 1, and that's why I think, Chaika's point of view was this is a guy who's at the best rental on the market, and he can help us get in the playoffs.
Yeah, and if he doesn't, they can move him. And I think you're exactly right. They wanted to get him there, Eck. They wanted to see, how he felt about it. But, warm weather and a nice place to live, it wasn't good enough, I don't think, for Taylor Hall.
Yeah.
And I think he wants to win. And I think he sees Arizona as a similar situation to what he faced in New Jersey, whereas you don't really know where they're heading. I mean, they've changed the ownership too frequently. They haven't made the playoffs. Like, you may like where they're at, but they could, trade away players a year from now and bottom out again. Like, from this perspective. So I think it probably is a tough sell for him, and Chaika probably realizes that. And then, depending on how he feels about how his team is going, and look, he could actually view this. I mean, we have no idea, but what if he viewed it as, hey, look, I'll trade him and get some really good assets, which will allow me to trade other assets to get someone else who help me get in the playoffs. Like, that's a possibility as well. Like,
no, exactly.
You
know what I mean? That he's not been, filling enough. Obviously, Chaika has like a value, like that he has an asset, but how valuable an asset is he right now when he's not, he's not tearing the roof down. He's a good player, obviously.
Well,
but he's not like he's not
if
dominating
you,
the NHL.
If you go
He's
by the
MVP,
assumption that he has a market that he has chosen,
I'll say it like, I'm sorry if I'm breaking up, but I'll say it like this: he's not the MVP that he was, and if he's not an MVP,
right,
then there you have it.
But if you go by the assumption that he's got a certain place that he wants to go, and okay, thanks, Zach. So if you go by the assumption that Hall wants to go to a certain place, and we'll just, for this example, say Calgary, then if Chaika would probably get the best return from Calgary, from a team that wants him and from a team that they think that he thinks Hall will sign with, like Mark Stone when he was traded from Ottawa to Vegas. I mean, I don't think Ottawa got the best return that they could for Stone, but I think it was pretty close to being the best return. And then it made it worth their while for Vegas to sign him to the extension. So, Russ, I think Calgary would give him a Sam Bennett or somebody of that nature in a deal to get Taylor Hall.
I mean, they would, but I really think this is like a last minute, within the last 2 hours of the trading deadline decision, because Kemper is not playing tonight, but there's a rumor he'll play on Thursday. If he comes in, he wins a few games in a row, I think all of this stuff gets stopped talking. Nobody talks about this.
Right. Yeah, I agree. All right. So let's move. The big story yesterday from the games that were played, I know that Dallas played the Rangers and Philadelphia played Detroit. But the big story was in Toronto, where it was a big matchup, two teams fighting for third place in the Atlantic Division. Florida had kicked Toronto's butt a couple weeks ago, 8-4. That started them on their losing streak right before the All-Star break. The Leafs played really well in the first two periods, but again have a instance of vapor lock in the third period, give up 4 consecutive goals to lose 5-3. And to make matters worse, Barkov was out of the lineup, Brian Boyle was out of the lineup, and Mark Pysyk, a converted defenseman playing forward, scored a hat trick. So it was just not a good result for the Leafs, but everything is minimized, Kev, by the injury to Frederik Andersen. It came out this morning after he didn't practice with the team. They said he got through the concussion protocol, so it wasn't a concussion. They diagnosed it as a neck injury, which sometimes that can cosmetically or so that can be mistaken for a concussion, and he has concussion issues in his past. Now Michael Hutchinson will start against the Rangers, which I'm sure the Rangers are very happy to hear, Russ, at MSG on Wednesday. And Kev, Russ and I were saying, well, the Leafs don't really need the backup if they're going to play Anderson a bunch of games between now and the end of the season. If there's any question of his health, now they desperately need a backup goaltender.
Yeah, I mean, they do, but, I tend to agree with what Ken Holland said to me years ago when he just said, look, no team in the league can lose their starting goalie and expect to, perform at a high level. Yeah, would it be better if they had a better number two? Of course. Yeah, for sure. And you need one in today's game anyway, because every point is so important that, you can't sacrifice points by putting in a guy that you don't have confidence can win those 25 games that you use them for. So it would be better, and there are going to be backups available. So I don't know why they wouldn't go out and try to do that. I mean,
well, the cap. I mean, they would have to do some cap manipulation.
But that's the way it always is, and everybody seems to find out how to do it. But we like to talk about it when we say, "Well, they're capped out; they can't."
No. But as an example. So what's your higher priority? Getting another defenseman or getting this third goalie now?
Well, I think it's getting another defenseman.
Right.
For sure. But, there's ways of manipulating the cap to try to get it to work. And, I'm sure they're going to do that. But, it could have been worse. Like, didn't you think, Mike, that this was a possible lengthy out when he went out? Or
I mean, especially if it was a concussion, and like I said, remember, if it's concussion and then he's out for 7 days,
right,
automatically. So I'm not disputing what the Leafs medical staff are reporting, but if they're not sure if it's a concussion, then it's better to say it's a neck and then go forward. Right. Before, very possibly, as we know, concussion issues are very difficult to diagnose at times. Sometimes they'll just come around after a week or so.
Or he plays again, and if there's another problem, then that could be a bigger problem. Right.
So they're playing the safe course here and saying neck injury and hoping that that's all it is. And then, hopefully he comes back on the weekend when they play back-to-back games against Anaheim and Montreal. But no, when he goes down, Kev, of course, I'm thinking worst case scenario here, because that's right now, that's everything that happens with the Leafs ends up being worst case scenario. They lose their best defenseman in Morgan Riley when their defense is extremely thin, and now they lose their number one goaltender, and we don't know for a fact how long he'll be out. If it's a couple weeks, that couple weeks with Michael Hutchinson as your backup could be the difference between you making and missing the playoffs.
Yeah, Mike texted me a picture of the Lusitania as soon as the injury happened. He did.
Why did that not surprise me?
I didn't, but that would be consistent. Yeah, and Mark Pizik was the U-boat commander shooting the torpedo.
Right.
So, but that being said,
I was going to say you can't bankrupt your assets trying to go after the best backup goalie like Alexander Georgiev, because the Rangers will hold him out for every last asset they have, and then they might not be able to get the defenseman they want. And if I'm Kyle Dubas, I know I'm looking at this team and it has some issues. I can't push all the chips in when I don't believe they can make it to the cup anyhow.
Yeah, and this is the worst case scenario, because this is not. Well, let's say it this way: if Frederik Andersen broke his leg last night and was out for the season, then his money would go on long-term injury, and they could replace him. But this is a concussion. We don't know how long he's going to be out. He could be out. Yeah. He could be back next week, or he could be not. He could be out for the season. But the thing is, they don't know, and they cannot spend his cap space when it's an unknown length of an injury. That's the whole thing with Morgan Riley. He's out, they think, until mid-March. But if if they know for sure he's out the rest of the regular season, then they can go out and trade for a defenseman because they have the cap space. But they don't know, so they can't go out and do it. That's the whole thing with LTIR and IR when it comes to the deadline. It's really a game and a shell game in a sense of moving money around.
Yeah, no, that's part of it. How you survive in today's NHL is you got to have a little bit of luck. With long term, you really do.
Luck is a part of it.
Because two short term injuries versus one long term can have a tremendously helpful impact on your team. But what's fascinating to me is I the hot rumor, as you know, Mike, has been Dumba, coming to Minnesota. Now, what's really fascinating to me about that is, I'm thinking Brendan Dillon, Martinez, a player of that, the kind you can plug in for 20 minutes and, you're going to get good, stable, solid, dependable defensive play.
Yeah.
Dumba doesn't fit that. Now, Dumba is a highly skilled player.
Yeah.
With a big physical edge too.
For sure. But he's not the quite the guy that I thought they would get. But he also fits very nicely with that group up front, very nicely. I think Dubas, in some respects, and my buddy Tom Laidlaw, the former NHL player, says this quite regularly. He thinks Dubas wants to play just an offensive style and see if he can try to do it with the team he's got. With obviously he's going to try to improve the back end a little bit, but he's not going to sacrifice that the arsenal that he has up front. Yeah, he'd rather try to win it the way it is.
I will say this, Kev. Just imagine they do trade Dumba, right? What do Minnesota Wild fans go back and think that team did with the expansion draft? Because then you've lost Tuck, you lost Holla, you gave those guys up to save Dumba. Now you're trading Dumba. Like, if that trade isn't a home run, that sets a team back 5 years.
Yeah, that's a new regime, obviously.
I know. It's the same franchise.
But is that trade being made because Dumba is not playing well under Boudreau, who I think a lot of people think, Boudreau might be gone after this year? Yeah. So, would you hold on to that guy based on how he's going to play under a new coach? Or, honestly,
we're looking at a way out of the cap too, Mike. That's the other problem is they have cap problems.
Yeah. Now, and Kevin, I agree with, you would think that the Leafs would probably go in the rental direction, Dillon or maybe Vatanen or somebody like that. But the problem is with their cap situation, they probably have to trade a guy like Cody Ceci just to clear the cap space to get a defenseman back. And believe me, after the way he played last night, no Leaf fan is going to be breaking out their crying towel for the departure of Cody Ceci. But the reality is, who's going to take him, and what is it going to cost for those teams to get a team to take him, unless it's the team they're making a trade with? That's the whole thing. It's like,
I get all that, but at some point, like, nobody talks cap space as much as the Maple Leafs fans. Yes. Like everybody's got similar problems, but why is it the Maple Leafs, when they have that problem, it just seems like it's the most incredible problem in the history of the world that nobody has ever faced?
Because they got people like me covering them. That's why.
Honestly, it really is an issue. Like, I'm not diminishing, the fact that it's a difficult situation for them to try to improve their team with their cap situation.
No, but Kev, I'll give you an example. What if one day 2 practice goalies were on the ice for the Leafs at practice? It would be a massive story. All of a sudden, it would be like, oh my God, what's wrong with Anderson? What's wrong with Hutchinson? And maybe they come out 5 minutes later. Like, that's
I get it, but my only point is all those things can be resolved. Like, there are ways to do it. You got to be creative. You got to figure it out. You got to, cut a deal with your buddy to, park CC to, you got to, you're going to have to do that. They all sort of figure out how to do it. And, is there consternation involved with that? Well, of course. But, that's just all part of it. But I'm sure they can figure out a way. Like, I think it's possible that you could trade for Dumba and get a backup goalie and not just totally disrupt what the Maple Leafs have going. Now, I don't know what the answer is because I've never sat down and tried to figure it out. But I guarantee you, within the organization, they've got 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 or 10 scenarios that gives them that. Yeah. But it's like I said, I'm not diminishing it. I get it that they're capped out and they want to improve their team, but I don't think it's nearly as a negative situation as that the Maple Leaf Nation seems to think it is. I think it's correctable.
Russ, let's just say when I have at least 5 blogs this season that have the name Casimir Kaskasuo in it, you know that I'm part of the situation, because I'm sorry, people are interested when it's not Anderson on the ice and when it's Kaskasuo being called up from the Marlies.
But I would say this, and I'd be interested, since Mike, you deal with them more than I do. I would argue that the Leaf fan base understands salary caps and things like better than most fan bases. There's a pretty complex understanding, like if a Leaf fan is mad at you for something you write, that you'll get the vitriol will be horrendous and he'll heap it upon you, but he'll be smart about what he's talking about. Like, he'll know what's really happening, which
and he'll think I'm dumb.
So, he'll still let me have it with as vile names as he or she can come up with, because sometimes it is a her.
Mike, nobody ever calls you dumb to your face, ever.
So,
all right, let's move on to this, because tonight there are 13 games in the league. It's the end of the bye week for a number of teams, and I've heard some criticism of the whole, like, half the league having the bye week before the All-Star break, half having it after the All-Star break. The Leafs were off for like 8 or 9 days. It was a challenge to find things to write about. But fans want games, and they understand the break for the All-Star game, which is 3 or 4 days usually, but to heap another 5 days on it. What is the feeling around the league of how these bye weeks are playing out?
Yeah, I don't think the league likes them whatsoever, to be honest with you.
Right.
I think they're just trying to figure out, the best way to do it. Obviously the players love this, and I think there'll be more discussions about whether this has worked out the way they didn't like them the way they were before. Nobody did.
Right.
So now I think it's split. So there is an improvement, in my opinion. Because there are some people that like that. You have a nice little time, lengthy time off. So it's going to be interesting to see. They'll have more discussion on it, but it's a good time for it to happen, because obviously they're talking about a CBA. Yeah. So you can kind of fold all this in and sort of work on it. But you're never going to make everybody happy. And to be honest with you, most players are thrilled to have these. This time off, and I think it's a good thing. I think it refreshes the players, to be sure, but it's really disruptive for the fan. I know after the All-Star game, you're missing teams. You're going like, what the heck? Why is there only a couple of games? And it just seems like you lose momentum, is what it feels like to me. So,
Ross, what do you think?
No, you do lose momentum. There's no question about it. I will say this though. I felt like the games have been good. Even the games with 3 a night, there's been at least one really good game. So I think they've lucked out that way. It could have been a lot worse, I think.
Well, the one point that I heard was, because it happened like in the last couple of days, teams coming off the bye week who had been idle for 8-9 days, playing teams that had played after the All-Star break, who had gotten a couple games in, and they thought that was unfair to the team that had the break, because the first couple periods of the first game back, they're going to be slow. They're going to be not, they're not going to have their hands or whatever. And that if they continue this, that it should be teams on the bye week playing against another team on the bye week, and not a team that had been in action. That would be fair.
I will say this. I don't want to defend the schedule makers 100%, but I would like to see half these fans or anybody in the media get in a room and try and figure out an NHL schedule. It's impossible, man. It's one of the hardest jobs in the league. It really is.
Yeah, I mean, you would think that the computer would kick out a better schedule than, for example, Buffalo right now, after the All-Star break, is playing 9 games in the span of 10, the 9 of the next 10 games at home in Buffalo, when this is the worst weather time of the year. And, half their fan base drives down from Southern Ontario into the Buffalo area, you would think that they would want to spread those games out a little bit and not have them all in a block in late January and early February, but that's the reality. So I know that's building availability and other things of that nature.
Well, you know what the other thing is, Mike? Because a lot of Flyers fans were complaining about their schedule, right? They were overseas and everything else. They were asked and they agreed to it. The Flyer, when you do a computer model, the owners aren't agreeing to it. You still have to speak to the owner when it's extra travel and they have to agree to it.
Yeah, and the teams still don't want to play games, or they'd rather play them in the middle of the season in the winter and not compete against the NFL.
Right.
Like you still have, you get this list submitted from teams, and they say, look, and there's always a lot more concerts in the fall than there are in the dead of winter. So, you've got building availability issues. Plus, you have teams saying, I only want to play, 8 home games in the first 2 months because, we don't draw as well, or whatever. We don't, it just can't get people. The walk-up sale isn't as good, whatever the reason. And so now everything gets crammed in, and then you end up with, 4 games and 6 nights, and then your coach complains about it, and then the GM doesn't, fess up and said, well, that's the availability that we sent in,
Right.
Yeah.
So it's complicated. I feel sad for the schedule maker because he just gets abused, and most of the time it's not his fault. Like I'm sure if it was up to him, he wouldn't want a team playing that many home games, but that's what he has to work with, essentially.
Now, Russ, you mentioned Kiefer Bellows being recalled by the Islanders. Obviously, at this time of year, when a young guy is being called up, the first thing you think of is showcase, that they're calling him up, have other teams take a look. And we'll talk about Bellows in a second. But Kev, I wanted to ask you this, because the last 2 games I was at in Buffalo, 16 teams were represented on Tuesday night against Ottawa. 20 teams in the press box against Montreal on Thursday. I think the reason it was so heavy is because you've got Buffalo, Ottawa, and Montreal are all potential sellers. But it's tough not to misinterpret all those scouts being in there as anything other than trade interest, because, it has to be, right?
Yeah, no, I would agree. I mean, everybody's sort of looking around and seeing what's available, and scouts, historically, this is the time of year when you go heavy on the schedule. You want to see all the teams because you don't know, your boss is going to call up and says, hey, give me your report on whomever. So for sure. And I think that's exactly why Bellows was brought up. Like, I think he is a key component that would probably fetch exactly the kind of help that Lou Lamoriello thinks this team needs, which I think is another scorer. And if you're going to, get a proven scorer, you're going to have to give up a prospect. And Bellows has been a little slow to develop. I still think he's got a chance to be a really good player, but he hasn't hasn't had a rocket ride to success. Let's put it that way.
I think it's a partial showcase. I honestly think because it's multi-layered with the Islanders and they need more than one scorer and a defenseman, that I think there's a part of them that would hope that he would stick too, because it would solve a problem until they get to the deadline. He's got 16 goals this year. He has good speed. He has a physical nature, so he could slam you in the corners, but he does have to be around that 10, 15-foot area to score with his wrist shot or inside close. And we'll see. He doesn't. The last time I saw him, he had very good physical strength, but now you'll match him against NHLers and you'll see if he can get around the net. If he can and he could pop in some goals, that would be a boost for them, and then they might not trade him. So they need more help. They need more than just that one scorer.
It could simply be, Russ, that they want to see if he can play in the NHL, then they'd be free to trade somebody else who's on their roster.
Sure. Well, again, I feel like if they were going to showcase, why aren't you calling up Josh Hosan? But again, they just won't do it.
Why do I get this weird feeling that you're not going to see Josh Hosan again until Seattle has a team and he's going to be the guy? Yeah. By the way, Kev, have you? I mean, this has been really strange the last week or so. First, we heard Kraken is the name. Then the Seattle Twitter feed comes out and says a decision has not been made. And then now in the last couple of days, there's speculation that it actually is Kraken, but they didn't want somebody on Twitter breaking the news. I mean, have you heard anything?
No, I really haven't. But none of this surprises me. I mean, you want to debut the name on your own schedule. It's all marketing related, and you're just going to deny that. And maybe they haven't finally formalized that that's it. Maybe that's the leading candidate, but everybody's got to sign off. The ownership maybe hasn't made up their mind. It could be a million reasons, but I think it would be a great name, to be honest. And with the problems they were going to have with the Sockeyes, because there was a writer there who had a fictional team as part of her book series called the Seattle Sockeyes, and actually had
they had the name copyrighted or something.
Well, she sells memorabilia, sells jerseys and stuff out of the book series. So it was kind of a complicated situation for them.
You don't have to go sockeye because there are other types of salmon. I'm just letting people know.
Well, for sure, but the Sockeyes.
I know I've eaten many of them.
The one they do so much marketing research, and the Sockeyes was a very popular name with the fan base, and it probably would have made some sense to do that, but there's always problems. Obviously,
I'm back to the Seattle Pilots. I'm sure that name is dead.
I was going to go back to the Metropolitans because there are no good professional sports teams.
The Totems was also very popular, and I just don't like that name. I don't know why I don't like it, but the Totems just didn't do it for me.
No, it didn't do it for me either.
Yeah, I get that there's a historical basis for it and all that, but the Kraken is, and I think that golf commercial, people will relate to that. So
People make a decision already. Can they just make it?
Yeah, I thought it was supposed to be at the All-Star game. That's what I thought.
So
I thought it was supposed to be announced at the All-Star game.
Not that hard. Vegas made it a lot quicker than this, and they had a problem. And they
did have a problem. So
now, Kev, we know that Steve Yzerman is going to sell before the deadline. If the defenseman can stay healthy, he might be able to move Green or Daly. What have you heard about Athanasiou? Because that's sort of been up in the air.
Well, it's been a real hot rumor, and the hottest rumor is that Ken Holland and Steve Yzerman are very good friends, as we all know, and that they've been talking, and that Holland knows all of Athanasiou's warts.
Mm-hmm.
He was part of the contract negotiations. He knows that. He knows the issues he had with Jeff Blashill. He knows because of where they got him that people are concerned about his attitude a little bit, that he's always a little bit punkish with his coaches and so forth. But I've heard that he's still interested in him because obviously he scored 30 goals at the NHL level.
Sure,
and he's fast. He's always a breakaway.
I would agree. He was the one that agreed to a contract, even though there was all that talk. So that does make sense.
Yeah, and so there was. And he knows him like Athanasiou is not going to surprise him. And I think I don't think he's a center in my opinion.
No,
but they've tried him at center just with the hope that would make him more responsible defensively. But I think he's just a great fast winger, and he's going to get a lot of breakaways, and he's going to convert 35% of those or so.
Mm-hmm.
I think he could still be a dynamic presence. And the name that's listed out there with him coming the other way is Puljujarvi. The thought is the Red Wings will want a little more if they haven't asked for more.
Right.
But Jim Matheson, the veteran writer, has suggested, I think, a third or fourth round pick. I'm sure Yzerman wants a second rounder.
Right.
But we'll see how that goes. So
maybe they make that a conditional.
Yeah. It's sort of hard to reconcile if you're a team that's rebuilding like the Red Wings are. If they trade Athanasiou, what that says is Yzerman doesn't believe in him.
Right.
Because, you've got a guy who's still a young man who's already scored 30 goals in the league, and you're going to trade him away for a guy you're not really sure of either.
Right.
Why do it?
Well, it could signal that he doesn't believe in it. It also could signal the fact that He's an arbitration eligible RFA. I think he's 2 years away from being a UFA, or two or three. And if they have to sign him to a long-term extension, maybe that's something that Yzerman doesn't see. I want to invest $6 million a year in Athanasiou because, I mean, that's a big investment. I mean, they have the cap space, but if they don't truly believe in him, they don't want to sign him long-term for that kind of money. So that,
well, and he's had a poor year. He's been hurt, but he hasn't played well. He's minus $1 billion, and he just hasn't played like he did when he scored 30 goals. There's no doubt about it.
If it comes down to, do I want to sign Mantha or him? I'm signing Mantha every time.
Right.
Yeah, I think Yzerman really likes Mantha a lot.
Not many guys have that wrist shot, and that's
well, every time he's on the ice, he's noticeable.
His skill is unbelievable.
Yeah, and I think Yzerman. If I had to, just guess, because Steve plays his cards close to the vest, I would say that he loves his first line with Larkin and Bertuzzi, and Mantha, and I think he thinks he's got something in Hronek, who has stepped up and is really been their best defenseman.
I actually thought Chalowski looked pretty good last night against the Flyers.
I think they're down on Chalowski.
I don't know. I mean, he's still developing.
Well, you may be right, but I'm just saying that's my perception. The perception.
I mean, he was out. He was in the game late when they took the goalie out, so they can't be that down on him.
Yeah. I think they are, but I mean,
maybe they are and Blashill's not. Maybe it's that.
That could be. That could be.
I want to offer some hope though for Red Wings fans, because yesterday in the Bean Pot, Robert Mastrosimone scored a huge goal for them to get BU a win and put them in the Bean Pot final. I thought that was a steal when they got him 54th overall. Like, I followed him closely, A, because he was with the Steel and they were a good team. B, he's a Long Island kid that grew up not too far from where I did. So I would keep tabs on him, and he's got speed and skill, and he hasn't had a tremendous season, but he's only 19. So he's got 15 points, 9 goals, but he had 31 goals last year in the USHL, and this could spark something in him. And this is exactly the kind of player 2-3 years from now that the Red Wings need to restock the pond. And so I think if you're the Red Wings, if you're a fan, watch the Bean Pot final.
Yeah, and we know it's going to take years and years, but I mean, I have to be encouraged about the Red Wings, Kev, when it comes to Veleno and Seider and the young guys that they have coming through the system. They just need more of that talent to really.
Yeah, I'm a little unclear whether Veleno is a scorer. Russ, what's your read on that? I think they think he can plug in as the second line center, but
I think he's a second line center, but I do think he's a playmaker more than a scorer.
Yeah,
I do think that he's a physically strong kid. Like, this guy is
right.
Cool. And so
I think everybody agrees he's a good hockey player. I mean, like a real good player. I think what there's some disagreement in is how much he's going to produce offensively. I'll tell you a guy that I think Steve Yzerman does like, and you don't hear about him much, is Giovanni Smith.
Yeah, Giovanni Smith can play.
And he's an intimidating presence.
Yeah,
and they think he's got some skill and he's going to play in the league.
He's got speed.
I would argue that they think that was one of Tyler Wright's, the outgoing scouting guy's, best picks.
I know Tyler a little bit, and he did his homework. Like, Tyler worked hard.
Yeah. I think the Red Wings really liked him quite a bit, and I think they like the person Rasmussen, but I think I would guess they think he's a third liner at best.
I think he probably is a third liner because
he's playing the power play.
Yes, he's your classic third liner, but you put him on the power play, you get him in front of the net because he's got great hands and he's got size. I think that's what his role is going to be, and then we'll see how many goals. He's only a goal scorer. Like, and I don't say that in a real negative way, but that's his worth in the game. So he's got to be that guy.
I've seen
it settled on him as a center too, by the way, which is sort of a news, because they tried him at wing as well, but I think they think now that he's better at center.
I've seen Smith a couple games in the AHL, and he's scary. So if he puts it all together, that's going to be, a nice ad for that. Just to finish off the show here, I saw this little note here, and it just made me feel really old. NHL Network will celebrate the 40th anniversary of the Miracle on Ice through the month of February. And Kev, I remember to this day watching that. And the thing was, unlike most people in Buffalo who watched it with Al Michaels on ABC later when it was not live, I watched it. I think it was on CTV. I think it was Don Whitman. I can't remember who the broadcaster was for CTV, but the Canadian broadcast carried it live, and I watched it live. And them beating Russia, I can't believe it's 40 years. I really can't.
It's hard for me too, but it's time for me again to make my annual hope that they finally do this. If you go to Lake Placid, that arena obviously still sits there. It's a historic place.
Yes.
I do not understand why the place from which Mike Eruzione launched that game-winning wrist shot is not marked on that ice. And I say that because so many tournaments are played there, youth tournaments, things, young kids end up there, and they ought to be able to look down and see right where Eruzione was when he scored the most important goal in American hockey history. I just don't understand it.
Great point.
I've gone to people at USA Hockey when I have been at Lake Placid. I've beseeched the arena people and it would take, and with today's GPS, it would be simple.
I'll bug Dave Fisher about it again this year. I will.
Yeah, it just bugs me that I've written about it. I've talked about it every year that they haven't marked that place.
I do want to say what I'm most proud of about it. I've said it before. My older brother bet me on this, and he took Russia. He's 3 years older than me, and I think he thought he was swindling me, and we bet like $20, which back then was a lot for me. And because I was I think I was still doing a paper route, or maybe I was on to like another lousy job. And I just looked it up. That $20 is worth $62.37 today. I'm very proud of that.
This is sort of just like, I mean, it's very esoteric. But if I had $1 for every time I've watched highlights of that game or the game itself, since it happened, on YouTube or whatever, the ABC broadcast. And I don't know whether this was an optical illusion from their cameras or if it was actually the color of the ice, but the ice looked blue underneath. There were sections, if you watch the video, if you go to YouTube and watch it, because I know that rink was also being used for figure skating. The ice looked like underneath the ice, it looked blue in sections. So I don't know whether that was just the cameras or the angle or the lights in the building, but look at it. It's sort of strange.
Go ahead, Kev, if you had something.
No, I was just going to say, I'll have to look at it. I didn't notice that before.
Yeah, I didn't notice either. I'll have to look at it too. The one thing that stunned me in that game was Tretiak getting pulled. Like, I was 17, and I knew about Tretiak, and I was like, why? Why is this happening? It didn't make any sense to me, and I don't want to take anything away from the U.S. guys, but if Tretiak stays in there, it could be a different game. I don't get it. I didn't get it.
No, well, the Russians didn't get it either. I mean, the veteran Russians, still talk about that.
I know.
I've talked to Larionov and Fetisov about it through the years, and nobody understood, what was happening. And, it was just the one thing that I've always been, and the players did, have kind of talked about this with me as well. Like, look, the miracle on ice, this doesn't change the fact that it was a miracle on ice.
Right.
But the team was a lot better than people ever gave it credit.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. I mean, and when you look about it, Ken Morrow ended up being just an institution.
He should be a Hall of Famer, actually.
Yeah, and Dave Christian moved back to defense, ended up being a 30-plus goal scorer at the NHL. And Mike Ramsey was a dependable veteran, gritty.
Mark Johnson.
Mark Johnson was a terrific player.
Pavlik, Dave Smoke.
Yeah, center ice was Mark Johnson, Pavlich, and Wells was the fourth line center.
Was Silka center? I don't remember.
No. It's a bigger name.
It wasn't Rob McClanahan. It was Neil
McClanahan was the winger.
Neil Broughton.
Yeah. Right. I was gonna say I knew it was a big time player.
Yeah.
So you got Broughton and Pavlich, and God, no, I'm just.
You can't recreate it because. Like last year, you saw the difference in the talent well, not last year, last Olympics, when the kind of guys we sent, they don't have that same enthusiasm that these guys had or the same hunger.
Well,
and you could never recreate that. You really,
you know what the funny thing is, I actually think that what you're talking about, Kev, is sort of colored by the comments that Jim McKay made after the game. He made the analogy of a bunch of Canadian college football players beating the Pittsburgh Steelers, and it wasn't that. It was. I mean, just because Team USA lost at Madison Square Garden a couple weeks before the Olympics, I think it was like 8-1 or 8-2, didn't mean that team wasn't good. There were a dozen NHL players, Bill Baker on that, other guys on that team. They were not as bad as people made them out to be.
Well, yeah, no, that for sure. I mean, I don't think people sort of understood how, and like right before then, they had the debacle at Madison Square Garden, and the speech that and both Herb Brooks, the late Herb Brooks, and Jim Craig both collaborated on this, that this was actually exactly what he said. He told Jim Craig in that game he had gotten bombed that he had lost a few miles per hour off his fastball. That was the exact verbiage he used, according to both of them. And Craig knew what he was saying. He was just furious over that. Just incensed that, Brooks said, he said, I played you too much, and now here you are, we're about to go in the games, and you've lost a few miles per hour off your fastball. And that kind of fueled him and got him ready for that. But
he knew what buttons to push.
I want to give a good example too. Like Brooks knew his players, and I'll give you a perfect example. Like Rob McClanahan, he was more than a point a game in college. He goes through that. He didn't do great with the Sabres, but then he gets reunited with Herb Brooks, and he has a 22-goal season because I just looked it up. And that was because Herb Brooks knew what to do with certain players. Right. And that was the magic of that team. That's what made Herb Brooks so good, is because we may not be able to see it, but he knew. He knew what to – and Laidlaw used to always talk about, what Brooks would tell him he could do and couldn't do, right? So –
well, that's right. That's right. I have to run, guys. But
see you, Kevin.
Yep. See you later. Bye-bye.
Okay, we'll take a couple questions in the chat and end the show there. I knew that Kevin had to get going. That's why I was trying to end it quickly. But we'll take a couple.
I blabbered on. Sorry.
No, I'm just as guilty. The one thing, and we'll ask him the next time. I wonder how. I know that they had a lot of the players as consultants on the movie Miracle, but I wonder how accurate the Kurt Russell speech was to what Brooks actually.
Well, I know the answer because I was on the junket for that.
Okay,
and
go ahead.
It was partially accurate because it was laced with profanities that Disney would not put in there. That's what the guys were saying. Like, they whitewashed it.
Right. But it's still, honestly, it's still great.
It's still great, but it was greater. And that was the thing that sort of bugged some of them, was because it really wasn't authentic because they cleaned it up.
Right. Okay. Richard in the chat asks, any thoughts on the Leafs and Campbell? I'm assuming that's Jack Campbell, backup goalie of the Kings. What would the cost be? I don't think it would be really that much because they have Cal Peterson. But the thing is, Campbell is signed for 2 more years. He signed an extension with the Kings. And I think the extension, he's making like 1.6. I don't know how interested Toronto would be in him, because that would lock them up for 2 more years on somebody maybe they just want as a stopgap. Yeah, it's 1.65 for 2 more years after this year.
But he's a known quantity in the sense that that's what the salary is. I think it would take a 2nd-round pick, though. I do.
And I don't think Toronto.
I don't think they're doing it.
Yeah, no, I don't think Toronto would pay them. I think Toronto would pay maybe a mid-round pick, a 4, a 5, a 6.
Yeah, I don't think LA will accept that, though.
Right. For a Campbell, no. For somebody like, say, I'm just using this as an example, for a Cal Pickard,
right?
For a 3rd goalie, just to have
for Aaron Dell. Aaron Dell at this point is going to get like a 4th-round pick.
They would have to, but then San Jose would have to retain probably 50% because he's making almost $2 million.
Right.
All right. Let's see here. What's up with the top of the draft class? Is Quentin Byfield still consensus number 2, or has there been significant shifting there?
No, I don't think there's been significant shifting, but I do think that, at least in my own rankings, and I don't know what the feeling is out there because I haven't asked enough people yet, but I think there's a scenario where you could look at Jamie Drysdale being 3rd.
Right.
Because he is the best defenseman. Depending on who is going for that pick, I'm only ranking him third because I think as a defenseman, that's his worth and where he should be. And look, I mean, there's Cole Perfetti, there's Lucas Raymond, there's some great talent after that. But I do think Drysdale has separated himself. So I don't think he can move to second. Does that mean a team wouldn't take him over Byfield? I can't say that yet because, if a team really thinks that he is a number one and they need that, they may they may pass over Byfield to take it as a need. It's unlikely, but it could happen.
Yeah, I mean, if an organization is loaded up the middle,
right,
and they're desperate, like say for example, I'm not saying they're loaded, but say Chicago gets the number 2 overall pick. They've got Taves, they've got Strome, and they've got Kirby Dach.
Right.
But defensively, they're a train wreck with the big contracts of Keith and Seabrook, and then they still have DeHaan, and they need defense. Now they have Boquist, but they could use a defenseman, so they could take Drysdale. And Drysdale was what? He was the number 7 on Team Canada at the World Junior, but Cale Makar was a couple years ago. He was the number 7. So, okay, Thomas Boyle, Mike and Russ, do you see Lou getting fired if the Islanders miss the playoffs? No way.
Nope, he's 100% safe.
No way.
Ownership loves him.
Yeah, because he doesn't spend anything. That's why.
Correct.
He keeps things in line. Bardicus, Duclair's been super cold. Any chance he gets moved? Any rumors along those lines?
Well, he's going to get moved. I mean, there's no question about it.
He's an RFA, Russ. That's the thing.
Yeah, but I still think he's going to get moved.
Unless they get a first round pick, they could trade him. But
I don't think they'll get a first. But I think if they get offered second and a player, I think somebody would take him. There were definitely teams that would take him on as an RFA. But I think from Ottawa's standpoint, based on the season he's had, do they really want to pay him a big salary on a 3 or a 4 year deal? And I'm going to say no.
Okay. Creepy Robsta asks, why does Arizona keep picking up scorers when their system doesn't help with scoring? Well, they need scores, so that's why they're picking up scores.
Right. They're not that loaded with scoring that all of a sudden they can't use it.
Right. I mean, they traded for Kessel, and they traded
not scoring.
Why? Because they can't score, and they can play shutdown defense if they have both their goaltenders playing well. But the way you win you can't win every game 2-1. You've got to be able to score. Now they've had better health than they've had in previous years. Guys like Stepan hasn't gotten hurt, but some of the other young players, Keller and a few other Dvorak, they haven't gotten hurt. So they have less excuses, but they're still not scoring enough to be home and cooled out for a playoff spot.
The problem here is, and you mentioned Kessel, how many years are left on his deal?
2, I believe.
Yeah, he's going to be one of those guys where at the age of 34,
2 at 6'8",
will be trending down because he's already trending down with the 11 goals. Last year he had 27. I'm not sure he could even reach that.
Phil Kessel will be exposed for the expansion draft.
Yeah, there's no question. I think that's accurate.
A couple more quick ones. Any more news on Hall to the Islanders, or is that just to get me fired up?
Yes, Morello. We do the whole show just to fire you up.
Yeah, there you go. But we're doing it so on February 24th at 3:01, you can be crushed because it won't happen. I don't think
it's on a windshield.
I fly on a windshield. I don't think it's realistic. I really don't. I mean,
I don't think it's realistic either.
Yeah, because I don't think Arizona's dropping that far out where they're going to consider trading Hall. Right. I think they got him to get in the playoffs. I think they're going to keep him. Just like I think Toronto is going to be in the mix in the playoffs in the East, and they're not going to trade Barry. But if they both collapse in the next 3 weeks, then I think both teams could say, okay, I got to get something now while I have a chance.
Right.
Okay. We didn't answer this one yesterday when we were doing our prices, but what would it take to get Kyle Palmieri in terms of?
I think a second and like a B type prospect.
I think it'd be a second and an A because they have to have something to show for it.
Well, I mean, a B could be really good depending on the organization, right?
Sure. Michael asks, did Montreal ruin Kotkaniemi by bringing him up too early? I think it's too early to make that.
Let him back. We'll say that.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's too early to make that judgment. But, on this show, Russ and I both said, come on, he's 18 years old. I know he's
number one center. That's rough.
and he had a good year, a good first year, but still,
but didn't do what Kotkaniemi is known for doing. Like I want to say, what do you have? 20 points that first year?
32, something.
32. Yeah, I mean,
11 goals, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good year, but it was too early. It was just too soon.
Yeah. And finally, Richard asks, how is Columbus 28-16-9? Torts has to be coach of the year. I mean, he's definitely the leader.
I voted him as the Jack Adams. He is definitely the leader. They are getting – I mean, Pierre-Luc Dubois is having a really nice season. We could start there.
Yeah.
Their defense is good. Seth Jones is underrated.
They've got two of the best defensemen in the league, and Werenski and Jones. That helps.
And that really – nobody really looks at that. But Elvis has saved their season. Like, it made John Tortorella look even smarter. There's no question.
Yeah. All right. We will be back tomorrow, and maybe by that time we'll have the results of the Iowa caucuses.
Maybe.
For Kevin Allen and for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thanks for watching, and remember, without the buzz,